joined by Professor Herman Singh, who's the Chief Executive Officer for Future Advisory. Thank you so much for your time, Prof.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you here. Now, you've spoken a lot about the power of ecosystems, and I'm curious to know what you mean by that and the importance of public and private partnerships in building a more inclusive payment system.
So an ecosystem is really a group of companies, people that come together for mutual benefit. A good example of an ecosystem, the word ecosystem actually comes from ecological system. And we use it to describe the Brazilian rainforests or a coral reef. So you get a whole bunch of life forms that arise, and the only reason they exist is because they all happen to be there in the first place. So they benefit from each other, nothing gets wasted, it conserves energy. And you have massive diversity of fish or birds or animals because, well, they're all together and there's food and it's nourishing. So that's where this concept of the ecosystem comes from. We see it now, if you look at any app store, an app store is basically an ecosystem. And so you have two components in any ecosystem. In the case of the Brazilian rainforest, it's the tree, or coral reef, it's the coral. And if you look at an app store, it's the app store itself that's the platform, like a coral reef, and on it sits all of these partners and players who help each other.
Yeah.
And so that's really what an ecosystem is. And what we find is in nature, like in business, if you are able to gather a significant number of players together with a very open ecosystem, and it becomes mutually supporting, you get this amazing exponential growth, where because you're supporting each other, conserving energy, helping each other, you get this amazing explosion of diversity, conservation of energy, and basically explosion of life. We've seen it with business, we've seen it with apps, we've seen it in nature, and we need to see this in the payment space. And so in the payment space, what is really lacking is we don't have this common platform like you have in nature. You know, the ocean is an ecosystem, the trees are an ecosystem, the coral reef is an ecosystem. We don't have this in payments. Visa, MasterCard tried to build theirs, PayPal built theirs. What we've ended up with is a whole bunch of ponds. We don't have an ocean. And the problem we have is if everyone's fishing in their little pond, but actually if you put it all together, it's a lot better for everyone. That's really what I mean about building an ecosystem. And the way that ecosystems work is it works on something called Metcalfe's law. And we see that because the internet is an ecosystem. And Metcalfe's law says that if you grow the number of customers by 2, the number of transactions and the value of the ecosystem increases by 4. So the value increases at the square of the increase in players. And that concept hasn't been bought into in the payment space. What we need to do is get more people to believe in collective good rather than own good. So right now we're a little bit selfish in how we're playing. Everyone's looking at self-interest. If we can come in and adopt an ecosystem mindset, we can grow this for everyone.
And that speaks to collaboration. And it's collaboration between the regulators, the banks, and the fintechs. And of course, how government can facilitate all of this. I was listening to one of the speakers saying, you know, fintechs will apply to the regulations if it suits them. But at the end of the day, everyone needs to collaborate and partner together, especially here in South Africa, to make sure that there is financial inclusion for all.
That's true. And so the role of the regulator is very powerful in the South African environment, and because we have both power and intention.
Yeah.
Many countries we have power but no intention, or we have intention but no power. But in South Africa we have both, which is really good. We have resources, we've got a budget, we've got a team that's leading it, and we've got purpose. Now, so the benefit of this is that in rolling out, for example, the payment ecosystem modernization program, as we saw Pradeep talking about this morning, what you're starting to do is you're starting to coalesce some of these ponds together. And what should happen is hopefully this goes viral. And if it goes viral, the other participants start to see the benefit of this, because there's 2 ways in which you could collaborate. One is you could formalize this entire thing with rules and regulations and committees. That very rarely it works, but it works in the very long term. And I don't think we have time for this. You look at what killed the post office globally was WhatsApp. And so while the post offices were all trying to get better at moving mail, WhatsApp came along and killed them, right? Because it took so long to basically improve. So everyone's sharpening knives for a gunfight. That knife's not going to help you. We've got to all understand this is a gunfight. We actually need to work together here. And we've got to avoid what happened to post offices worldwide. And so collaboration should arise organically. It should be something that people do naturally. It shouldn't be externally imposed. Generally, what stops collaboration is self-interest, it's trust, it's the fact that everyone's looking after themselves. People are unwilling or unable to collaborate. So some people may say, I want my own pond for myself. So how do you solve this? You've got to create a reason to collaborate. You've got to make sure people know who to collaborate with. And a really good example of this is a cryptocurrency. Because what happened in cryptocurrency was Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he is, nobody knows who he is, built the original blockchain for Bitcoin and disappeared. He built this amazing thing. And the amazing thing about Bitcoin is it allows for collaboration between people who don't know each other. And they don't have to trust each other to collaborate. Now that is an amazing model, and the way in which it works is based on what's called consensus-based decision-making. And so everyone's got a node, and as long as you've got a node on the Bitcoin blockchain, you have a right to decide. And if 50% plus one decide, that happens. So that's a very interesting way. That's called a distributed autonomous organization. So people collaborate without even knowing each other. Now, I think that's a little bit too laissez-faire for the payments world, which needs to be more formalized. But I do think what we've got to do is create a faster way to reach consensus. It's taking too long. And I think government's got this ability to now coalesce people around this to get consensus-based decision-making to happen faster. And consensus-based decision-making does not mean unanimous. What we're aiming for is sufficient consensus. The problem is, in trying to be too inclusive, you slow the whole process down. You just got to get sufficient consensus that this is the way we're going, because there will always be a minority who tries to stop this. And we've got to find a mechanism for breaking deadlocks so we can move quickly. That's really what we need.
And then maybe just in closing, I mean, you know, there was a conversation yesterday about the fact that there isn't really an issue when it comes to financial inclusion, but rather the fact that even when people are financially included, they don't really have the means to participate in this financial inclusion. So it's one thing to give somebody a bank card, but then they're unable to use that bank card efficiently. And I'm just curious to know how you think the private and public partnership and collaboration can help these undeserved communities and help these upcoming small businesses that need that assistance.
So a good example of this is what happened in Brazil and India. What happened in both cases is the central bank said, I'm going to build a platform that's going to be an open platform. In the case of India, they made it free. And they basically said any person can pay any person free of charge. Now, if you're going to have a look at this, it's already reaching a couple of $100 billion of payments. I mean, you can pay a beggar on the street using this UPI smart code, and all that you need is a phone. And beggars have got phones. Why? Because in India, they rolled out a smartphone for $20. Well, $20 is 350 Rand. So you can get a smartphone for 350 Rand. It doesn't look like a smartphone. It looks like a traditional phone, but it actually runs most of the so-called apps. And so by lowering the cost of smartphones to $20, everyone has access to payments. You can receive payments, you can make payments, and everybody gets a QR code. The government gave everyone a QR code. The QR code identifies who you are, so you have an identity as a sender or a recipient, and it's very easy to go to a shop and top it up, give them cash, top up your wallet, send money to everyone. This thing has grown explosively. COVID was a big factor for both Brazil and India, and now, in a sense, we don't have this COVID wave to help us. We're going to have to find another wave that makes us go viral. But if we adopt the same philosophy, which is build a platform that works on the cheapest device we have, design it for the lowest common denominator, make it as secure as possible for that device, and make sure that you make it free. You have to make it free, because if you make it free, think about cash. Cash is free to get, free to keep, free to use, and generally secure. Well, if you make a payment free to get, free to keep, free to use, that's not a bank account. Bank account is not free to get, free to keep, and free to use. So if you can make a wallet that's free to get, free to keep, and free to use, you've replaced cash. And I'm not saying we're ever going to kill cash. I don't think you ever will. No country has. But I think what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to launch a system that suddenly everyone's prepared to use because of this. It can be anonymous. And in the case of India, the average payment is actually 200 rupees. And the average person is making, the government limits it at 10 payments, I think, a day. You can't do more than 10 a day. But some people are already pushing for 20 a day. $2 is 30 Rand. So the average person, the average value of the payment is 30 Rand and it's free. Now, if you look at South Africa, I suspect our average payment is around 30 Rand. And if people are using cash for this, and we move it to this kind of system, and you keep it free, I think you could easily make payments inclusive.